I found out my sister-in-law took out a loan in my name, and now my husband is taking her side. I never imagined I would be the one sharing a story like this, the kind you stumble upon late at night when you can't sleep. Yet here I am, my hands unsteady, staring at a stack of official documents that have turned my life upside down. It isn't merely about the money, though that alone would be enough to cause sleepless nights. It is about the betrayal. It is about the realization that someone who shares our Sunday dinners, who plays with my children, who calls me family, has done something I cannot simply overlook. I thought I understood what family loyalty meant. I thought the boundaries of trust were clear. I have come to understand that I was mistaken. Now I am faced with a choice that could reshape everything I have built. My name is Amelia, and I have a routine that many would consider dull. Every morning I wake at 6, brew a pot of standard drip coffee, and take my cup to the back porch. That quiet half hour is my sanctuary before the household stirs. Our home is modest. A 3-bedroom house in a suburban neighborhood, not fancy, but filled with warmth. My husband, David, teaches history at the local high school. He has a way of weaving stories about the past into our daily conversations, comparing modern dilemmas to ancient conflicts. I work as a freelance graphic designer, a career that allows me to be creative while managing our busy household. Our 7-year-old twins, Leo and Max, keep us on our toes with their endless energy and curiosity. We live comfortably, not extravagantly. David's salary as a teacher and my project-based income cover our needs with a little left over. We have a savings account, carefully built over years of small sacrifices, meant for emergencies or perhaps a family vacation we keep promising the boys. It isn't a fortune, but it represents our security, our peace of mind. David's younger sister, Vanessa, has always been a vibrant presence in our lives. She is outgoing, charming, and has a flair for the dramatic. For years, I admired her ability to light up a room. She works as a marketing assistant, but she frequently talks about starting her own business, a boutique that sells handmade jewelry and accessories. I always encouraged her dreams, offering to design her logo for free. She had a way of making everything sound possible. Vanessa has a partner, Thomas, who is quiet and often overshadowed by her energy. Together, they live in an apartment downtown. They often joined us for family dinners. David adores his younger sister, and I always appreciated the bond they shared. He was protective of her, often calling her the baby of the family, even though she was already in her early 30s. I saw no harm in it. I thought it was sweet. The trouble began subtly, like a tiny crack in a wall that you barely notice until it spreads. It started with small comments during our Sunday dinners. Vanessa would sigh dramatically and talk about how difficult it was to get a business loan as a single woman. She lamented the strict requirements, the endless paperwork, the rejection emails that crushed her spirit. I sympathized with her. I knew starting a business was tough. David would pat her shoulder and tell her to keep trying, that she was brilliant and something would work out. Then, the request started. She needed a model for a jewelry photo shoot, so I spent an afternoon posing awkwardly in her living room. She needed feedback on her business plan, so David and I stayed up late reviewing a document that was frankly full of over-ambitious projections. I wanted to be supportive. I believed that is what family did. One evening, about 4 months ago, she arrived at our doorstep looking distressed. Her eyes were red-rimmed and her usual cheerful demeanor was gone. She claimed her landlord was threatening eviction because a construction project next door had ruined her business prospects. She asked for a small loan, just a few thousand, to tide her over until she could find a new apartment. David looked at me with those pleading eyes. We had the money in our savings, but I hesitated. It was a significant amount. However, seeing her so vulnerable, so unlike her usual self, I agreed to help. To her credit, she paid that money back in a few months. I was relieved. I thought the crisis had passed, and our trust had been reaffirmed. A few weeks later, she asked for a smaller favor. She was applying for another loan, this time from a less conventional lender, and she needed a reference. She wanted to use our home address to make her application appear more stable. I was uncomfortable with the idea. It felt misleading. But she insisted it was just a formality and would only help her get approved. "It's just an address," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "It doesn't mean anything." Against my better judgment, I agreed. I should have known then that the boundaries were being blurred. Last Tuesday, my peaceful morning routine was shattered. I had just finished my coffee and was preparing to start my workday when I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. I usually let unknown calls go to voicemail, but something made me answer. The voice on the other end was professional and courteous. A woman introduced herself as a representative from a finance company. She was calling to confirm a loan application that had been submitted under my name. My mind went blank. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a prank or a mistake. "I think you have the wrong person," I said. "I haven't applied for any loan." There was a pause on the other end. The representative then read out my full name, my address, and my date of birth. My laughter faded. She explained that the application had been submitted online using a copy of my identification that was on file. She described the details of the loan, the amount, The repayment schedule. It was substantial, far more than a small loan. It was the kind of figure that could take years to repay. My hands began to tremble. I asked her to hold on while I stood up from my desk and walked to the window. My heart was pounding against my ribs. I felt dizzy. I asked her for more details, specifically about the applicant's contact information and the bank account listed for the funds. She provided a phone number and an email address. They were familiar. They belonged to Vanessa. My first instinct was to deny it was her. I thought perhaps her identity had been stolen too. Maybe someone was using her information to frame us. It sounded far-fetched, but I wanted to believe in her innocence. I wanted to believe that my family wouldn't do something like this to me. I ended the call in a haze. My legs felt weak. I sat down heavily on the edge of our bed. I felt nauseous. I replayed every conversation with Vanessa over the past few months. The desperation, the constant talk of financial struggles, the request for my address as a reference. It all clicked into place, and the picture it painted was deeply unsettling. I tried to compose myself. I had to be rational. I called the finance company back to ask about the signature on the document. They confirmed it was an electronic signature, submitted with all the necessary documentation. They sent me a copy of the application via email. When I opened the PDF, I saw my name typed and then an electronic signature that was clearly forged. It was a clumsy attempt. The signature didn't even look right, but the loan had been approved based on our household income and credit history. It was a serious fraud, and my name was attached to it. David came home from school that evening. I told him everything. I was shaking, my voice trembling as I showed him the email on my laptop. He listened quietly, his face pale. He read through the application, his jaw tightening. He closed the laptop and was silent for a long moment. The silence in our living room felt heavier than usual. "It's a mistake," he finally said, his voice low. "There has to be an explanation." I stared at him, searching his eyes for something. I wasn't sure what. "Her phone number and email are on the application," I said slowly, as if explaining it to a child. "This wasn't a mistake." He refused to see it. He immediately defended her, saying that she would never do something like this intentionally. Maybe she was pressured. Maybe she felt she had no other choice. His automatic defense of her, without even considering the position I was in, sent a cold wave through me. "David, she used my identity," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She could ruin us." He ran a hand through his hair and let out a deep sigh. He looked exhausted, overwhelmed. "Let's just talk to her," he pleaded, "before we jump to any conclusions. Let her explain herself." "For me, please." We made a decision to confront her at the family dinner on Sunday. I wanted answers. I needed to hear it from her, but a part of me knew that his refusal to see the truth was going to be the hardest part of this ordeal. Sunday arrived with an uneasy stillness. The morning sunlight streamed through our kitchen windows, but it felt different somehow. Colder. I spent the day in a fog, going through the motions of laundry and meal prep while my mind replayed the conversation we were about to have. Leo and Max sensed something was off. They kept asking if I was feeling well, their young eyes studying me with concern. I forced smiles and assured them everything was fine. David was quiet too, retreating into his usual Sunday routine of grading papers, but I caught him staring blankly at the same page for nearly an hour. By 4 o'clock, my stomach was in knots. I had changed outfits twice, settling on a simple navy sweater, something comfortable but not too casual. I wanted to appear calm and composed, not confrontational. David drove us to his parents' house, his grip on the steering wheel tighter than usual. We didn't speak much during the 15-minute ride. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and accusations. His parents, Margaret and Robert, live in the same house where David and Vanessa grew up. It's a traditional colonial-style home with a wraparound porch and a garden that Margaret tends with devoted care. Every Sunday, the extended family gathers for dinner. It is a ritual I had come to cherish, a sense of belonging that filled something in me I didn't know was missing. That evening, however, the familiar comfort of the house felt different. The floral wallpaper, the worn wooden floors, the smell of pot roast simmering in the kitchen, it all felt like a stage set for an inevitable confrontation. Vanessa and Thomas arrived shortly after we did. She walked in with her usual flair, a bright floral dress and a cascade of laughter as she greeted everyone. She hugged David, kissed his cheek, and then turned to me. Her smile was wide, genuine. She wrapped her arms around me in a warm embrace. I felt my body stiffen. I managed a faint smile and returned the hug, but my hands were trembling. She didn't seem to notice. The dinner table was set with Margaret's fine china, the good silverware that only comes out for special occasions. The conversation flowed as it always did. Robert talked about his golf game. Margaret discussed her latest gardening project, and Thomas quietly listened, occasionally nodding. Vanessa dominated the conversation, as usual, recounting stories about a difficult client at work and her plans for a weekend getaway. I watched her, studying her gestures, her expressions, looking for any sign of guilt or deception. I found none. She was entirely at ease. David caught my eye from across the table. He gave a slight nod, a signal. It was time. I waited until the main course was finished and Margaret was clearing the plates. The timing felt cruel, but I knew I couldn't leave without saying something. I took a deep breath and placed my napkin on the table. "Vanessa," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "I need to ask you about something. It's important." The table went quiet. Everyone looked at me. Vanessa's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before returning. "Of course, Amelia. What's on your mind?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the printed copy of the loan application. I slid it across the table toward her. "I received a call from a finance company last week," I said, keeping my voice steady. "They told me a loan had been approved in my name. This is the application. Your phone number and email are on it." The room fell into a profound silence. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Vanessa stared at the paper as if it might disappear. Her face drained of color. She looked from the document to me, then to David. Her lips parted, but no words came out. "Is this a joke?" Margaret asked, her voice sharp with confusion. David cleared his throat. "We just want to understand what happened," he said, his tone gentle. "We're not accusing anyone. We're just trying to figure this out." Vanessa's composure cracked. Her eyes filled with tears and she let out a shaky breath. "I can explain," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what it looks like. I was desperate. I didn't know what else to do." Thomas leaned forward, his expression unreadable. He picked up the document and scanned it. He set it back down slowly, his face grim. "Is this true?" he asked Vanessa. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "Things have been so difficult," Vanessa continued, her words tumbling out in a rush. "The business was failing. I had bills piling up. Couldn't ask you for more money after you already helped me. I thought if I could just get approved for this loan, I could pay it back quickly, and no one would ever know. I made a terrible mistake." "I'm so sorry," Margaret gasped. Robert set his fork down with a clatter. "You did what?" Robert said, his voice rising. "You used Amelia's name without her permission? That is fraud, Vanessa. Do you understand what you've done?" David raised his hand, trying to de-escalate the situation. "Let's all just take a breath," he said. "She's clearly upset. She made a bad decision. We can figure this out." I felt my heart sink. I looked at David, searching his face, hoping to see some outrage, some anger on my behalf. All I saw was his familiar protectiveness, but it was directed at her. "A bad decision?" I said, my voice trembling. "David, she forged my signature. She took out a loan in my name. This isn't a bad decision. This is a crime. She's my sister," David said, his voice strained. "She made a mistake. We can fix this without calling the police. She can pay it back. We can work it out." Thomas finally spoke, his voice low and measured. "I didn't know about this," he said, looking at me. "I had no idea. I'm sorry, Amelia. This is wrong. What she did is wrong." Vanessa was sobbing now, her mascara running down her cheeks. Margaret moved to her side, patting her back, muttering soothing words. Robert looked stricken, caught between his daughter and his sense of right and wrong. The entire scene felt surreal. I was sitting at my family's dinner table, the scene of countless happy memories, watching my husband defend the woman who had used me. I looked at David, really looked at him, the man I had married, the father of my children, the person I trusted above all others. He was looking at his sister, his baby sister, with nothing but pity. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't seeing what she had done to me, to us. "I need some air," I said, pushing back my chair. I walked out the back door onto the porch and let the cool evening breeze wash over me. I leaned against the railing, my hands gripping the wood until my knuckles turned white. The sky was fading into twilight, the first stars beginning to appear. I heard the door open behind me. I didn't turn around. David's footsteps were heavy on the wooden porch. He came to stand beside me. He didn't touch me. "I know you're angry," he said quietly, "but we can't just abandon her. She's family. She needs us." I turned to face him. His eyes were soft, pleading. He wanted me to forgive, to forget, to make it all go away. But I could feel something shifting inside me. A tectonic change in the very foundation of our marriage. "She didn't just make a mistake, David," I said, my voice steady. "She took my identity. She put our financial security at risk. And you want me to just accept her apology?" "She said she's sorry," he said. "She was desperate." People do desperate things when they're scared. "At what point do her actions have consequences?" I asked. "At what point do you see me? See what this has done to me?" He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The silence between us stretched, heavy and painful. I could see him wrestling with himself, with his loyalty to his sister and his obligations to me. It was tearing him apart, and I could see that. But it wasn't enough. "I can't do this right now," I said, turning back to face the darkening sky. "I need to go home. I need to think." I walked past him back into the house. The scene in the dining room was quiet and somber. Vanessa was still crying at the table. Margaret was comforting her, and Robert looked exhausted. Thomas was staring at the floor, his hands clasped in front of him. I didn't say goodbye. I grabbed my purse from the hallway table and walked out the front door. I waited in the car, the engine running, staring at the dashboard. I didn't know how long I sat there before David got into the driver's seat. He didn't speak. He started the car and pulled away from the house. We drove home in complete silence. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, but my mind was racing. I thought about our savings, our plans for the future, our children's college fund. I thought about the loan sitting in my name, the interest accumulating, the potential damage to my credit. And I thought about David. He had chosen her. He had chosen her in that moment, at that table, and I didn't know if I could ever unsee that. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't let this stand. For my own peace of mind, for my own future, I had to protect myself. I grabbed my phone and called the police. Not to press charges, not yet, but to report the identity theft. I needed a record. I needed protection. I needed to show David that this wasn't just a family squabble. This was real. This had consequences. I didn't tell David what I had done. I didn't trust him anymore. The days that followed were the longest of my life. Our home, once a place of comfort and warmth, became a battlefield of silent glances and unspoken words. David and I moved around each other like strangers sharing a space. He slept on the couch that first night, then the second. By the third night, he was back in our bed, but there was a distance between us that felt insurmountable. He would reach for me in the dark, his hand searching for mine, but I would pull away. I couldn't bear his touch. It felt like a betrayal of myself. I had reported the identity theft to the police, but I hadn't told David. I knew it would cause an explosion, but I also knew it was the right thing to do. The loan was in my name, and it was my credit, my future. My children's future at stake. I had to protect what was mine. The officer I spoke with was understanding, taking down all the details and giving me a case number. She warned me that it could be a long process, but she assured me I had done the right thing. Meanwhile, Vanessa had been calling multiple times a day. I let every call go to voicemail. Her messages were a mix of tearful apologies and desperate pleas for forgiveness. She claimed she had already contacted the finance company to stop the disbursement of funds. She said she was working with her bank to secure a personal loan to repay the amount that had already been approved. In one message, she sobbed that she couldn't sleep, that she was filled with shame. I listened to each message with a hollow feeling in my chest. Her words, no matter how remorseful, couldn't undo what she had done. Margaret called too. She wanted to mediate, to bring the family together to heal. She spoke of forgiveness and understanding, of how families needed to stick together through difficult times. I listened politely, murmuring responses when necessary, but I felt no warmth toward her pleas. She was asking me to be the bigger person, to let go of my anger for the sake of harmony. She didn't understand. She couldn't. She was Vanessa's mother, and her instinct was to protect her child. I couldn't fault her for that, but I also couldn't sacrifice myself for her comfort. Robert called as well. His voice was gruff, filled with a heavy sadness. He didn't make excuses for Vanessa. He simply said, "I'm sorry, Amelia. This is a mess. I don't know how to fix it." I appreciated his honesty. It felt more genuine than Margaret's pleas for peace. He was acknowledging the gravity of the situation, and that meant something to me. Thomas reached out separately. He came to our house one afternoon, his face etched with exhaustion. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared so many meals. He told me he was devastated by what Vanessa had done. He had no idea about the loan, and he felt betrayed too. He told me he was considering leaving her, that her deception had shattered his trust. I watched him speak, his hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee he never drank. I saw my own pain reflected in his eyes. "Where is she now?" I asked him. "She's staying with her parents," he said. "She's too ashamed to come home. She's afraid of what I'll say." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know what to do, Amelia. I love her, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined." I reached across the table and placed my hand on his. It was a small gesture, but it felt important. "I don't know what to do either," I admitted. "I thought I knew her. I thought I knew all of them. But now I'm not sure about anything." Thomas left shortly after, and I was alone with my thoughts. I realized that I couldn't keep this secret from David any longer. He had a right to know what I had done, even if it would cause another rift between us. I had to be honest, even if it cost me. That evening, I waited until Leo and Max were in bed. I found David in the living room, staring blankly at the television. The news was playing, but he wasn't watching it. He looked exhausted, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "David," I said, sitting down on the arm of the couch, "I need to tell you something." He turned to look at me, his eyes tired but alert. "What is it?" "I reported the identity theft to the police," I said, my voice steady. "I filed a report. I had to protect myself, David. I had to make sure there was a record of what happened." The silence that followed was deafening. He stared at me, his expression shifting from confusion to shock to something that looked like anger. "You did what?" he said, his voice rising. "Amelia, she's my sister," she apologized. "She's trying to fix it." "Why would you do that?" "Because she broke the law. I said, keeping my voice calm, because she used my name, my identity, without my permission. Because if she doesn't face consequences, what's to stop her from doing it again? To someone else? She's family, he repeated, as if that single word could erase everything. And I am your wife, I said, my voice cracking for the first time. I am the mother of your children. Where was your defense of me, David? When did you stand up for me? He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. I could see the war raging inside him, the conflict between his loyalty to his sister and his duty to me. He ran his hands over his face, a gesture of pure frustration. I don't know what you want me to say, he finally said, his voice defeated. I'm trying to hold this family together. I'm trying to keep everyone from falling apart. Sometimes holding a family together means letting someone face the consequences of their actions, I said. Sometimes protecting the family means protecting the person who was wronged, and that person is me. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something shift in his eyes, a flicker of understanding. He reached for my hand, and this time I let him take it. His grip was warm, familiar. You're right, he said quietly. I've been so focused on protecting her that I forgot to protect you. I forgot to see what she did to you, to us. Tears welled in my eyes. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear those words. I don't know if I can forgive her, I admitted. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I need to know that you're on my side. I need to know that you see me. I see you, he said, pulling me closer. I'm sorry, Amelia. I'm so sorry. We sat there for a long time, holding each other in the quiet of our living room. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't an ending, but it was a beginning. A tentative step forward. In the weeks that followed, Vanessa faced the consequences of her actions. The finance company canceled the loan, she was required to pay a penalty and complete a financial counseling course. The police investigation resulted in a formal warning, though no charges were filed because I decided not to press them. It was a compromise, a way to hold her accountable without destroying her life completely. Thomas moved out for a while, needing space to process. Eventually, they reconciled, but the trust between them was fractured. Vanessa began attending therapy. She reached out to me again, and this time, I listened. I told her I wasn't ready to forgive, but I was willing to try to heal. Our family dinners changed. The easy laughter was replaced with careful conversations. Margaret and Robert were more subdued, more aware of the fractures in their family. It wasn't the same, and I didn't expect it to be. Some things, once broken, can never be fully restored, but David and I found our way back to each other. It took time, patience, and many difficult conversations. We started seeing a counselor together, learning to communicate better, to prioritize each other. I learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing to move forward, even when the past still hurt. I still sit on my porch every morning with my coffee. The routine hasn't changed, but I have. I am more careful now, more aware of the fragility of trust. I understand that love and loyalty are not the same thing, and I know that protecting myself isn't selfish. It is necessary. The betrayal I experienced taught me a painful lesson about family, about boundaries, about the cost of silence, but it also taught me about my own strength. I faced something I never thought I could face, and I came through it, not unscathed but intact. And sometimes that is the best we can hope for.